In this presentation, we want to learn about the Laffer curve, or the backward bending supply curve. This concept is used to support many theories in economics. We'll use the Laffer curve to build a relationship between tax rates and tax revenues. We'll start by labeling the vertical axis with tax rates and the horizontal with tax revenues. In this case, tax rates are the percentage of tax levied against household income, and the revenues are the dollar amounts collected by the government. Here is the backward bending supply curve. What makes this supply curve different from most others we've seen is the fact that it's constructed with both a positive and negative slope. Starting from the origin, the lower region of the curve has a positive slope, where tax rates and revenues are directly related. However, at some point along the schedule, the curve bends over on itself, and the upper portion has a negative slope. Let's put some values on the axis to see why. We will start with a high tax rate, say 90%. This tax rate is very far from the origin. According to the model, with households paying 90% of their income in taxes, the government would collect 4.5 trillion in tax revenues. Remember, a 90% tax rate is very high and leaves little to households for consuming and saving. Next, let's look at a much lower rate, 30%. Looking at the model, at this lower rate, the same 4.5 trillion is collected in revenues. Economists argue that this may happen because at a higher rate, households engage in tax avoidance, and the lower rate is just not high enough to generate a lot of revenue. Based on this schedule, the optimal tax rate for the government to levy on households is 60%. At this rate, the government collects 6.5 trillion in revenues, more than any other point along the curve. That's because this point corresponds to the place on the schedule where the slope changes from positive to negative. According to the Laffer curve, the government should tax at 60% to collect the maximum level of revenues, 6.5 trillion. Taxing households at a very high or very low rate may generate the same lesser amount of tax revenues collected.